Hello, today we're going to take a look at data systems, databases. You know, if I had to break down the world of IT into different areas, I would say there's the infrastructure portion, and the infrastructure portion is all the network. Anything that has to do with networking, that's the infrastructure portion. Then part of, starting to, you've got that infrastructure, the next thing that you're going to build on would be all the servers. So what kind of server? Is it a database server? Is it an email server, which is a type of a database? What is it? What is that server? And then, of course, that is the computer components that are handing out the information that's needed. Part then of that would be, let's change it from server to client server, so that you have the clients that are accessing the data and the server that's handing the data out. And then on top of that would be the data systems itself. That's what I would break down, what we do into those three sections. Now, the truth of it, there's a wrapper around all of it, and that is programming. Programming or coding surrounds all of that, because you have to program the database software, you have to program how the CPU and the PC are going to work, how the server operating system's been programmed, right? All of that. The networking equipment has to be programmed. That wraps everything. And then I would say on the outside of that would be security, because you're dealing with program security and network security and database security, dealing with security on all those methods. So right now we're going to take a look at data systems or databases. And really this is just a general. You will take a class, it doesn't matter if you're in our general program or in our security program, that really forces you to dig in and use a database and create databases. And yes, what you're creating is small. It's not like what Amazon has done. But the idea is in that course is that it pushes you into understanding those concepts of how data systems work, because it's a massive portion of the IT industry. So let's get started. Let's take a look at this information. I'm going to back up real quick. This is the chapter introduction. And this is what you're going to get out of it, right? This is describe these advantages, identify common areas that you're going to get a job in. What the heck is big data? What the heck is a SQL command? All that stuff you're going to get into. So I'm going to start with a couple of examples. Amazon, which I mentioned, is a perfect example. Some people will still think that this page was just simply designed and somebody had to, make a little area here for the picture and then paste the picture in, or have this area that's going to switch the pictures. It's actually much more advanced than that. Web design has to do with page layout, how things look. It's harder to find a job doing that. Web development has to deal with, how do I connect this portion that I'm seeing on the screen? How do I connect that into the data system to pull information out of that data system? That way I can change the pictures in the data system, and this page will automatically grab those pictures. So everything that you see in here basically is calling to a data system, a database, and pulling the information out about this item, right? That came straight out of the database. That way you can update that information in the data system, and it'll automatically populate what we see here. Now, another thing, I love to show this one because actually it's a really cool site. And some of you are aware of what it is, but I love to show you this one because this one goes way back. See how this is written here, IMD, and then there's a lowercase b. What is that, just style? Like, oh, that's cool, a lowercase b. This actually, that uppercase D and lowercase b is how they always signified a database. It goes way back into probably the 70s. And so IMDb, that was a name that would have made sense to anybody on the internet when this was created, which would have been in the mid 90s, which is Internet Movie Database. You would automatically go, oh, this DB means this is a database. I can find out whatever I want to in here. And it's a fantastic database because really what you've got here, got all these photos you can scroll through. Here's the fan favorites. All this is coming out of a data system. The people that work on this, They make some money. Let's just say that. So if I go to in theaters, that's going to pull that information out of what is actually in theaters. And I'm sure it's doing a date check. And then on the data system on the back end, somebody populated it, right? Because they've got websites that are, oh, Firestarter is going to come out at this time on this date, and it'll be released, and Doctor Strange will be released at this time, this date. And so that's all in the database. And then that way, what happens within this portion is just immense. It's basically saying, well, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm not in Wilcox, by the way, but that's my internet's going out through there, so they'd be thinking there. So when this runs, it just does a query and say, hey, according to today's date, what's out now, or what's out coming out on Friday, or what tickets can we sell right now? And boom, then it's populated. That way, nobody's coming in here and going, okay, well, let me update it for today. Doctor Strange has been out for a while. Let me type that in. They're not doing that. It's coming out of the data system. This is coming out of the data system. All of this is coming from a data system where it's much easier to handle the data there and populate these pages. So when we think of data systems, don't just think of dates and times and people's names, but also think of graphics, because that can be stored in there. I'm going to show you, this is actually off of teachcomputerscience.com, which is a fantastic website. It's got a bunch of stuff on database concepts. So you can take a look at that if you have any more information that you'd like to learn that me and Test Out don't cover. I want to show you that when we take a look at the database, we are creating tables. We're creating sets of information. And how we create the sets of information is shown here. A single item within the system is called a field. Single item of data is called a field. So here is a field. Its student ID is a field for this database, and these are some fake numbers that they put in. So these are all data items, but here is a field. Student ID is a field. Forename or surname and first name is, or first and second name, or however they want to term it, are fields. These are all fields. Date of birth is a field. So these columns show you what the fields are. And yeah, we could have flipped it, right? We could have flipped it on its side and said student was here and forename and surname and date of birth. But normally in data structure, for how we see it, the fields are columns. This is a field name. You have to name it, like, hey, what am I storing in this? I am storing the picture for this item, or I am storing the birth date for this item. A row is a record. Now that's a lot easier to understand because people are aware, the police might have a record on you. Well, what that means is that they basically have, back in the olden days, now it's on a computer, you would have a piece of paper that had the person's name and their address and what incident, what happened and why you were thrown in jail. All that stuff would be on your record, right? So a record is a set of fields that really describes what you're trying to store. Oh, this is the item number. This is when the item was produced. This is the picture for the item. This is our cost of the item. This is what we're selling the item for, right? So that would be a record of it. So when you build a table, you have to have fields and you have to have records to create the entire table. And so when you're looking at storing data, you're looking at how do I organize this data? Now, these days we use relational databases, and we go beyond that. But in this class, relational databases. And that's because they have something that's related to another data set. So if we took this example of students, there would be another table for me that says this is their grade. So that's a different table. It's not found in this table. And how we link them together is through the student ID. So your student ID would have all your first name, last name, date of birth, whether or not you qualify for financial aid, all the courses that you've taken, what you got as a grade in that course, right? You've got all this information. But McBride doesn't need to see all that when he's actually doing his stuff. He needs to know your student ID, your first name and your last name, and what class you're in. And then he can put in a grade for you. So we have a field that connects to that table, and now the information is related, right? So it's a relational database. Let me find, I've got one here. This is, nope, that's the one that pulled up. That's SQL. Here we are, here's a relation. These are all showing relations. This is a good one here. So you would have a table and it would be called teachers. And you would say, well, the teacher's got an ID. He's got a name, first name and last name probably. Then an office, a phone number and an email, right? Contact information. And then we'd have a classes, like what does McBride teach? So it'd have a class ID. We like to use numbers because you can't duplicate them, right? This class ID and the teacher ID would be automatically generated to make sure that we're not going to end up with duplicates. Then the course code, the day of the week it's offered, the time it starts, the end time, and then who's teaching this particular class. And there's the teacher ID. See, and these two are linked. They have a relationship. So that way, when I try to do a search, I can do a search across both of these data tables and pull out information and say, well, show me the teacher and their name and what classes they teach. And then it will pull data from each of those tables and give me a result. And that's how we organize databases. So, you know, fires, owners, parcels, tax. You can see how those are created. House, pupil, teaching classes, employee, department, court. So you can look at any of these. You just search for, like I did, relational database design. Here's one that's really starting to get in it. Let's see if we can actually pull that graphic up. There we are. And so then this way you've got all these tables, all your information is organized into these tables, and then they're all linked together or have relationships with different tables. So that is really the concepts that I want to cover. Now let's get into any other information that we might need to know, like data modeling and operational data. In other words, how is this stuff used? And a DBMS, a database management system. We want to take a look at that. And we want to take a look at what SQL is, because that's a big topic. And then we'll set you free on learning more about databases and creating your own databases. I like doing this. As a matter of fact, I tell people if I didn't love networking so much, you know, databases was right behind there, and I probably would have made a lot more money in it. They make a ton of money in data systems. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed linking the things together and being able to pull out the information and designing systems for people, but I didn't get into it that advanced. I didn't really jump into it. And that's because I kind of got bored with it and gravitated towards networking. Why do I tell you that? Because this is an opportunity to do just a little of it and learn what you can, because that access class is going to be full of concepts. And if you've already got these in your head, then it makes a lot more sense. One of the biggest things, I don't teach the access class, but one of the biggest things I hear from students about it is, wow, all these concepts and what am I doing? Because in order to really do the database, in order to really make what you need to make, you have to understand the concepts, and they get bogged down in that. So learn these simple concepts that they have here, take the time, try to remember it so that it will help you in your class later. Okay, so we already talked about a table here, right? That's a structure in a relational database. It's comprised of columns and rows, or fields and records. Right, we looked at that. Now, a query is a method for asking questions about the data stored in a database. Query, that term, right? I'm going to query you, right? We don't use query very often, but really what it means is search. I'm going to do a search on the database. We use search a lot more. We use that term all the time. But query basically is the same thing. And that's what they use in data systems. I need to run a query, not I need to run a search. All right, a form is a graphical interface that allows you to put the data in. So we looked at how the table is made, but for the standard user, you want to break it down as simple as possible for them. And you create a form, kind of looks like a piece of paper, and that way you can fill it out. All of you've done that. If you went out and said, I want a Gmail account, that's a form that you're filling out, and you are putting information into their data table, and it's creating an email address for you. If you've done that on Amazon, if you've done that on Yahoo, if you have a Microsoft Outlook account, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, all of you filled out forms and created a record within a database. And then, of course, a report usually comes from the query. So you run the query, shows you the information. Data Systems allows you to modify and change the report so you get what you want out of it. But that's what it is. It's an easy to read listing of that query that you ran. All right, so let's take a look at these data modeling, operational data, and analytical data. All right, so data modeling, that's a way to help programmers and other related parties make sense of database information. Not so hard when you're dealing with a simple database, but these databases are huge and massive. As a matter of fact, my son is being trained in data modeling now. He went into programming, and they said, hey, we need you over here. He's going to start doing some SQL. And so data modeling is a way to help people understand, where am I pulling this data from and how does that affect other things? That's why they get paid so much in those fields. It is complex. And if you train your brain that way, then you become one of the few that can really, really do it well. You get a lot of money. All right, so operational data, that's produced by an organization's everyday operations, the thing they're doing on a daily basis. It's gathered in real time to provide a snapshot of what's happening in the present. Being able to record how many sales this day, how many people logged into our site this day, operational data. Analytical data is historical. That helps people make decisions. It's usually market data, transactional data, some kind of sensor data, and natural language and machine data. Basically, in my example, if I say, well, operational data is how many people access the website today, and then we'll filter that down by week, then analytical data would be, let's compare what happened today with what happened last year, the year before, on this day for the past 10 years. Let's find out how many people logged into our website. Is that holding steady? Is that decreased or increased? That kind of stuff. The database management system, you get to use Microsoft Access. You'll mess around with a little in here, but again, the Access class will do that. This kind of software allows users to define, manipulate, retrieve, and manage data stored in a database. Examples are Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle Database, MySQL, and Microsoft Access. And these are not quite straight across examples. Like Microsoft Access is kind of an end user database, but you can use it heavily to run SQL queries against a SQL Server or an Oracle database or a MySQL database and show the results and have it formatted in a way that people want to see. And that's why they use Microsoft Access here in most educational institutions, to kind of show you that this is how a database functions and this is how you run queries, because when you start accessing the big dog stuff, this stuff, you'll know all the stuff you need to know, basically. So that is just the basics of databases, and you'll go through this process of getting a little more information on the concepts that we just talked about, but they don't get into it hugely, and then you'll get the opportunity to deal with actually doing a demo, watching a demo, and then taking a look at the database design. So I'll bring out a little more information about relational database facts, but not too much more. There's basic SQL commands. I would be kind of reading off a table, but I'll describe what SQL is to you, and we'll do that in the next video.